The moment I heard the scream, my heart stopped. It wasn't the kind of scream people make when they're startled or angry. It was raw, animalistic, the kind that comes from unbearable pain. And deep down, before I even left my office, I already knew. That scream had something to do with me. That morning had started strangely calm. Too calm. I arrived at the office earlier than usual, the city still half asleep beneath a pale gray sky. The glass walls of my executive office reflected my tired face back at me. 3 months pregnant, constant nausea, endless board meetings, and a marriage that had gone cold without warning. I placed my handbag down, barely managing to sip some water before the door swung open. Donovan walked in. My husband, the CEO, and the last person I expected to see that early. In his hands was a sleek, expensive thermal food container, one I didn't recognize from our kitchen. His face wore a smile so warm it almost felt rehearsed. "Good morning, baby," he said softly. "Happy third anniversary." I froze. 3 years of marriage and this man, who barely looked up from his phone these days, was standing in my office with breakfast? He placed the container gently on my desk, like it held something precious. "I wanted to do something special," he continued. "You've been looking pale lately. Work's been hard on you." Then he opened the lid. The smell hit me instantly. Strong, heavy, overpowering. Chitterlings. Slow-cooked, heavily spiced, steaming hot. My stomach twisted violently. If this had been 6 months ago, I might have cried from gratitude. But now, with pregnancy nausea attacking me every morning, that smell was pure torture. I swallowed hard and forced a smile. "Thank you, Donovan. That's thoughtful. But I already ate at home. I'm really full." His smile flickered, just for a second, then he pushed the container closer. "A little toast isn't real food," he said calmly. "I got up before dawn to make this. Eat a little, for your strength." His voice was gentle, but the pressure underneath it made my skin crawl. I opened my mouth to refuse again when there was a knock at the door. Saved. The door opened and Leela, the new executive secretary, stepped in holding a stack of documents. She was young, beautiful, perfectly dressed, the kind of woman who knew exactly what effect she had on men. Her eyes landed on the food container. "Oh, wow. Mr. Donovan, you cooked for Mrs. Amara yourself? She's so lucky." She smiled at him, too warmly. Donovan barely acknowledged her. He gave me a final look and left the office without another word. That's when an idea struck me. A simple one. A harmless one. At least, that's what I thought. I gently pushed the container toward Leela. "I really can't eat it, and it would be a shame to waste my husband's effort. Have you had breakfast?" Her eyes widened. "If you don't mind." "Of course not," I smiled. "Please, it's still hot." She practically hugged the container as she left, grinning like she'd won a prize. The moment the door closed, relief washed over me. I thought the worst part of my day was over. I was wrong. About an hour later, I was reviewing reports when a loud thud echoed through the office floor. Then, the scream. My blood ran cold. I rushed out of my office and froze. Leela was on the floor, writhing in agony. The food container lay overturned beside her. Chitterlings scattered everywhere. Vomit stained the carpet. She was clutching her stomach, convulsing. Foam at her lips. And then I saw it. Blood. Dark red blood soaking through her dress, pooling beneath her. Employees screamed. Someone called 911. I couldn't move, because in that moment, one horrifying thought pierced through me. That food wasn't meant for her. And then I felt it, a presence behind me. I turned. Donovan had stepped out of his office, but he wasn't looking at Leela. He was staring at the blood, his face twisted, not with concern, but with fear and rage. His eyes snapped at me, and in that instant, I understood something that made my legs go weak. He wasn't shocked that someone was dying. He was furious it wasn't me. Donovan grabbed my arm so hard my bones screamed. His fingers dug in like claws, pulling me away from the chaos as if I were the problem, not the woman bleeding on the carpet. His voice was low, shaking with rage he wasn't even trying to hide. "What did you do?" he hissed. "Why her? Why her?" The question didn't make sense until it did, because no husband in his right mind would react like that unless he had been expecting a different body on the floor. I yanked my arm back, fighting to keep my voice steady even while my heart hammered like it wanted out of my chest. "What did I do?" I snapped. "I gave her the breakfast you made. What are you saying, Donovan? Were you expecting it to be me lying there?" For a split second, his face betrayed him. A flicker of panic crossed his eyes. Then he recovered, fast, too fast. The ambulance sirens wailed below, growing louder. Paramedics rushed in, barking orders, moving people aside. Leela was lifted onto a stretcher, her body still twitching, her lips bluish, her eyes barely open. And Donovan, my husband, ran after them. Not as a caring CEO trying to help an employee, not as a man horrified by what happened, but as someone chasing a disaster he needed to control. Just before the elevator doors closed, he turned back and pointed at me. "You're coming to the hospital too," he ordered. "This happened because of the food you gave her. Don't try to dodge responsibility." The door shut, and I stood there in the office hallway, surrounded by whispers and terrified faces, feeling like I'd just watched my marriage die in public. My hand drifted to my stomach instinctively. My baby. If I hadn't been sick, if I hadn't refused that food, if I hadn't handed it to Leela, I couldn't even finish the thought. The hospital waiting room was freezing, the kind of cold that seeps into your skin and sits in your bones. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead like insects. The chairs were plastic, uncomfortable, and somehow perfectly matched the emptiness in my chest. Donovan paced from front of the ER doors like a trapped animal. He raked his fingers through his hair, clenched his jaw, checked his phone again and again. He kept shooting me sideways glances, suspicious and sharp, like I might suddenly stand up and confess to something I didn't do. And the whole time, one question screamed inside my head. Why did he look angry instead of worried? The ER doors finally opened. A middle-aged doctor stepped out, removing his mask. His face looked tired, trained exhaustion mixed with the kind of seriousness that told you something was very wrong. Donovan lunged forward. "Doctor, how is she? Is she going to be okay?" I stood up slowly and moved closer, my legs unsteady. The doctor's eyes shifted between us. They lingered on Donovan for just a little too long, like he was studying him. Then he spoke carefully. "She's stable now. She suffered acute poisoning. We managed to stop the immediate danger." Donovan exhaled like he'd been holding his breath for an hour. But the doctor wasn't finished. "However," he continued, voice hardening, "she experienced severe hemorrhaging due to ingesting a very high dose of misoprostol." The word hit me like a slap. I didn't fully understand it, but I understood Donovan's reaction. He went pale. Not concerned pale, not shocked pale. This was the color of someone whose secret just got dragged into daylight. His lips parted, but no sound came out. The doctor kept going, unaware, or maybe fully aware of what he was doing. Misoprostol is a medication used to induce uterine contractions. It's used in certain medical situations, including to induce abortion. The dose in her system was extremely high. This is not an accident. This appears intentional. My ears rang. Intentional. My hands turned cold. Then the doctor said the words that made the room spin. "Following protocol, we informed the police." And right on cue, two officers appeared at the end of the hallway, walking toward us with the calm seriousness of men who had seen too much to be easily shocked. Donovan snapped back to life instantly. His panic transformed into performance. He wiped sweat from his forehead, adjusted his jacket, straightened his shoulders, becoming the CEO again like he was slipping into a costume. Then he did something so cruel, I felt my stomach drop. He pointed at me. "Officers," he said quickly, voice trembling with practiced outrage, "you need to investigate my wife. This morning I prepared food for her. She had the container in her office before she gave it to my secretary. I suspect she put something in it out of jealousy." Jealousy? Like I was some petty woman in a soap opera, poisoning a girl over a man. Like he hadn't just admitted the food came from his hands. My throat tightened so hard I could barely breathe, but I forced my voice out anyway, calm and clear. "I have no motive," I said. "Check the security cameras, check fingerprints, and more importantly," I looked straight at Donovan, letting the question land like a knife. "Why would a meal my husband claims he cooked out of love contain an abortion drug?" The older officer nodded, his eyes sharpening. Then he turned to the doctor. "Doctor, what's the patient's condition now, and what were the consequences of this drug?" The doctor's expression darkened. He sighed, like he hated being the person who had to say it. "The patient was approximately 6 weeks pregnant," he said quietly. "The drug caused violent uterine contractions. We regret to inform you the fetus could not survive." Silence swallowed the hallway, a thick, suffocating silence. I heard a sound, something between a gasp and a strangled moan. Donovan's knees buckled. He collapsed into a chair like his body had been unplugged. His face looked broken. And in that moment, everything clicked into place with sickening clarity. Leela wasn't just his secretary, she was his mistress, and she was carrying his child. A child he didn't even know existed. A child his own poison had killed. I expected to feel satisfaction. I felt nothing, just disgust. Because the truth was worse than betrayal. This wasn't just cheating. This was a man capable of murder, trying to erase my baby the way you erase an inconvenience. The officers began separating us for questioning. As one guided me toward a quieter corner, I glanced back at Donovan. His head was bowed, hands shaking, jaw clenched. He wasn't mourning the baby. He was terrified of what the baby's death meant. Evidence, motive, exposure. And suddenly, I understood the real danger. If he could poison his own wife, what would he do now that he knew I'd survived? The police didn't treat it like gossip. They treated it like a crime scene, which meant no matter how polished Donovan looked in his tailored suit, no matter how powerful his name was, no matter how many times he tried to speak like a man who owned the world, in that hospital hallway, he was just another suspect. They questioned us separately. An older officer guided me to a quieter corner near a vending machine. His voice was controlled, his eyes sharp, but not cruel, like he'd seen enough broken women to recognize the shape of one before she spoke. "Ma'am," he said gently, "start from the moment you received the container. Tell me every detail. Don't leave anything out." I closed my eyes for a second and forced myself to rewind the morning like a video. "Donovan came into my office," I began. "Early, too early. He brought a thermal container and said it was for our anniversary." The officer's pen scratched steadily. "He opened it in front of me. The smell was strong. I felt nauseated. I'm dealing with morning sickness." I didn't say pregnant yet, not out loud, not there, not with Donovan still in the same building. I continued, careful, precise. I told him I already ate. He insisted I eat his food anyway. Then my secretary, Leela, came in with documents. Donovan left. I didn't touch the food again. It stayed on my desk. I pointed toward the memory, like I could still see it sitting there, steaming like a trap. I gave it to Leela because I couldn't eat it. She seemed eager. That's it. I didn't add anything. I didn't open it again. The officer paused, meeting my eyes. "Did anyone else enter your office during that time?" "No." "Did you leave the room?" "No." "Did the container ever leave your sight?" "No." His expression tightened slightly, like the story was forming a shape in his mind that he didn't like. Across the hall, I could see Donovan being questioned by a younger officer, and Donovan was doing what he always did when he felt cornered. He performed. I cooked it myself, he insisted loudly enough for people nearby to hear. I went to the market at dawn, prepared everything personally, nobody touched it, I put it in the container and brought it straight to my wife. It was almost impressive because he said it like it made him noble, like it proved he was a devoted husband. But the more he spoke, the more I realized something important. If he truly cooked it himself, then he had also placed the poison himself. His own alibi was turning into a noose, and he didn't even see it. The older officer walked away briefly and spoke quietly to his colleague, exchanging quick, meaningful glances towards Donovan. Donovan noticed. The moment he noticed, his performance cracked. His voice rose, sharp and desperate. "Investigate thoroughly," he barked loudly enough for people nearby to hear. "My wife has been unstable lately, jealous. She could have slipped something in when I left the office." I felt my stomach twist, not with nausea, but rage. I stood and walked toward him, stopping at a safe distance. His eyes flicked toward me, irritated, like I was ruining his script. I spoke calmly, but my words were steel. "Donovan," I said, "if you truly believe it was me, what would be my motive? To poison my secretary? Or are you scared they'll discover that the food was never meant for her, it was meant for me?" His face twitched, just once, but it was enough. His eyes darted away from mine, searching for ground, for air, for something that wasn't the truth. The officers didn't miss it either. Time crawled while we waited for the forensic results. Every minute felt like a nail hammered into my spine. I sat with my hand pressed lightly against my belly, as if my palm could protect my baby from the world. Finally, a forensic technician arrived holding a folder. His voice was flat in the way professionals speak when they're about to drop a bomb. "Fingerprints on the rim and spoon match Mrs. Amara and the victim. That supports both statements." Donovan's face loosened slightly, like he thought he'd won. Then the technician continued. "However, the toxic substance was fully dissolved throughout the stew. It penetrated the liquid and the meat evenly. That indicates it was added during cooking or immediately after, while still hot and stirred thoroughly, not sprinkled in later." The words hit the air like a gunshot. Donovan's mouth opened. Nothing came out. His eyes bulged in horror, because the forensic report didn't just disprove my guilt, it proved something far worse. The poison was already in the food before it reached my office, meaning the only person who could have added it was the man who prepared it, the man who delivered it, the man still trying to blame me. Donovan snapped. "That's impossible," he shouted. Maybe Leela took the drug herself. She was pregnant. She might have wanted an abortion and swallowed it before eating." Even the officers looked tired of him. I stared at him with disgust so deep it felt like ice. "If she took it herself," I said coldly, "then why was it in the stew? Are you saying she swallowed pills and somehow vomited them evenly into the container while stirring it like soup?" His face darkened. "Shut up," he hissed, stepping toward me. The older officer moved between us immediately. "Mr. Donovan," the officer said, voice like winter, "your statements contain contradictions. We need you to come with us for further investigation." Donovan froze. Then the officer added the final detail that made Donovan's skin drain of color. "We will also request security footage from your home, including kitchen cameras and recordings from your vehicle if available." Cameras. That single word did it. Donovan jerked like someone had jabbed him with electricity, because he knew what I knew. We had cameras in the living room that pointed towards the kitchen, and his luxury sedan had a dash cam that recorded every trip. If he prepared poison in that food, it would be there. And suddenly, for the first time, I saw fear in Donovan that wasn't performative. It was naked, primal, the fear of a man realizing his own trap had snapped around his neck. They led him away down the hallway. He kept glancing over his shoulder at me like I was holding the handcuffs. But I didn't feel victorious, not yet, because even as he was escorted away, one thought kept clawing at my mind. How did he have time to do this? He claimed he brought the food straight from home, but something about the timeline didn't sit right. Donovan was obsessive about schedule. Meetings, calls, movement, everything was tracked. Then why did he appear at my office so late after arriving at the building? Why did it feel like there was a gap in the morning? A hole in the morning? a space big enough to hide a crime. I left the hospital later that day without going home. I went back to the office, not because I wanted normalcy, but because I needed control. The building felt different now. Whispers followed me like shadows. People didn't know the truth, so they invented their own. I heard it in pieces as I walked. Did she poison the girl? Was it jealousy? I heard the secretary was pregnant. Poor CEO. Poor CEO. I wanted to laugh. Instead, I slammed my office door shut and locked it. A few minutes later, someone knocked softly. Amara. I opened the door to see Naomi, my trusted assistant, the only person in that building whose loyalty I didn't question for even a second. Her face was tight with urgency. She stepped inside and lowered her voice. I pulled the building footage like you asked, she whispered, placing a flash drive on my desk. And there's something really strange. My heart pounded. What? Naomi opened my laptop, plugged it in, and brought up the black and white security footage. She pointed at a timestamp. Donovan's car entered the garage at 7:15 a.m. I frowned. He walked into my office at 8:15. Naomi nodded. Exactly. It takes 5 minutes from the garage to your floor. So where was he for an hour? An hour? A full missing hour? My skin went cold. Naomi fast-forwarded. Another camera angle appeared, this one from the basement emergency stairway. A figure in a white shirt and mask moved quickly, carrying a large black trash bag, heading towards the back dumpster area. Naomi zoomed in. Look closely. Even with the blur, I recognized the posture, the gait, the slight hunch. My voice came out as a whisper. Marcus. Donovan's assistant, his cousin, his loyal dog. Naomi's eyes hardened. Why would Marcus sneak down emergency stairs with a bag like that? Why not use the regular trash bins? I stared at the screen. The bag looked heavy, heavy enough to hold gloves, containers, wrappers, a medicine bottle. Evidence. My throat tightened. That missing hour, I murmured, wasn't an accident. Naomi leaned closer. I think they got rid of something or tried to. The room felt like it had lost oxygen, because now it wasn't just suspicion, it was a pattern, a plan, a cover-up, and it meant one terrifying thing. Donovan hadn't acted alone. The missing hour wouldn't leave my mind. An hour wasn't just time, it was opportunity. Enough time to clean a kitchen, enough time to hide evidence, enough time to prepare poison and erase the trail. I stared at the frozen frame on my screen. Marcus slipping through the emergency stairwell with a black trash bag like a thief in daylight. Did you check where the dumpster truck went? I asked Naomi quietly. She nodded. Too late. Garbage pickup came less than an hour after that footage. Of course it did. Donovan never left loose ends if he could help it. But Naomi wasn't done. Marcus is cheap, she added. Careful, but cheap. He doesn't throw valuable evidence away right away. He hides it, keeps it until he's sure. I exhaled slowly. So he's scared. Yes, she said firmly, and scared people make mistakes. That was when I realized something important. I didn't need Donovan to crack first. I needed the weakest link. That afternoon, Naomi returned with another file, thin but heavy with meaning. She placed it on my desk and spoke softly, like the walls might be listening. I checked the apartment records for Leela. My eyebrows lifted. What about them? She doesn't rent her apartment. I frowned. What do you mean? Naomi opened the folder. The lease isn't in her name. It's under a company, D&M Consulting Group LLC. The name sounded fake even before she said it. My pulse quickened. Who owns it? Naomi met my eyes. Marcus. The room went silent. She slid another document forward. Bank statements. The rent is $2,800 a month, paid on time, every month. The money flows from D&M, but the funds entering that account come from Donovan's representation expenses. I let out a hollow laugh that scraped my throat. Representation expenses. That was what he called it when money disappeared from company books. I leaned back in my chair, bitterness burning behind my eyes. I wore the same old handbag for 3 years. I reused dresses. I listened to lectures about budget cuts and sacrifice. Meanwhile, he was paying luxury rent for his mistress through a shell company run by his assistant. Naomi turned another page. And there's more. She showed me a photograph, grainy but clear enough. Leela entering a private women's clinic, time-stamped 2 weeks earlier. She had an OBGYN appointment, Naomi said. That means she knew she was pregnant. I stared at the image. So Leela wasn't innocent. She wasn't a victim of ignorance. She was holding that pregnancy like a bargaining chip, waiting for Donovan to choose. But Donovan had made his choice, and it wasn't her. It wasn't me. It was himself. My phone buzzed. I didn't need to look to know who it was. Donovan. I inhaled, then answered. Amara, he said, voice tired, almost gentle. Where are you? I just got out of the station. They asked me everything. I softened my tone instantly. I'm at the office. I'm scared, Donovan. People are whispering. Are you okay? He sighed, dramatically. They'll realize this is a misunderstanding. I just don't want you stressing yourself. That's bad for your health. For your health. The irony nearly made me choke. I trust you, I said quietly. Get some rest. We'll talk later. I hung up and looked at Naomi. He thinks I'm still blind, I said. Naomi's lips curved into a thin smile. Good. That night, rain hammered the city like a warning. I didn't go home. Instead, I made arrangements. The next morning, Naomi returned with another update. Marcus is panicking, she whispered. He's been pacing all over the building, making calls, looking over his shoulder. Right on cue. Less than an hour later, my car screeched to a halt as someone stepped into my path in the underground garage. I slammed the brakes. My heart leapt, then sank. Marcus stood there, pale, sweating, eyes darting. He tapped on my window nervously. Mrs. Amara, he whispered when I lowered it slightly. I need to talk to you. I unlocked the door just enough for him to slide in. The smell of fear filled the car. He handed me a thin file with trembling hands. Mr. Donovan asked me to give this to you, discreetly. I didn't open it right away. What is it? I asked coolly. A medical record and a receipt. It shows Leela brought the medication herself. If you give this to the police, everything will be resolved. I opened the folder. Inside was a poorly printed medical note and a receipt listing my Soprostol. The paper was crisp, too crisp, the ink still glossy. I held it up to the light. This was printed last night, I said quietly. Marcus swallowed. You expect me to give fake evidence to the police so they can say Leela tried to abort her own baby and committed suicide? No, Mrs. Amara, please, he pleaded. The boss said this would protect you too. If he goes down, the company collapses. You'll lose everything. I closed the folder and looked at him with a stare so sharp he shrank back. Marcus, I said, you're already an accomplice to attempted murder. Forging evidence will only add years to your sentence. His lips trembled. I was just following orders. I tossed the folder back into his lap and take this trash and get out of my car. And tell Donovan if he wants to play theater, hire better actors. Marcus bolted like a frightened animal the moment the door opened. I sat there for a long moment after he disappeared, my hands steady on the steering wheel. Donovan was desperate, and desperation was dangerous. Back in my office, Naomi was waiting. Her laptop was already open. I checked call logs, she said. One number keeps showing up, over and over, especially the night before the poisoning. She turned the screen toward me. A name blinked on the display. Celeste Harper. My memory stirred. College friend, she explained. Pharmacist now. Former lover. Of course, a pharmacist, a former flame, a restricted drug. The puzzle locked into place. Naomi clicked another file. Security footage appeared, blurry but unmistakable. Marcus meeting a tall woman in sunglasses, a small package exchanged, wrapped in newspaper. My chest tightened. That's the drug, I whispered. Naomi nodded. Celeste is the supplier. I leaned back slowly, mind racing. She's educated, I said. Not a criminal. She won't go down quietly. Naomi met my eyes, understanding instantly. You want to pressure her. Yes, I said, before Donovan throws her under the bus. I stood up, determination settling into my bones like steel. Set up a meeting, I said. Somewhere public, with cameras. Naomi smiled grimly. This is where the real confession starts. And for the first time since that cursed breakfast, I felt something shift. Not fear, control. If you've ever wanted to see a confident person panic in real time, let me tell you, there's nothing louder than silence after a lie collapses. I chose the cafe for one reason: cameras. The place was upscale but discreet, tucked into a side alley with soft jazz playing low enough for secrets to feel safe. The kind of spot where people met to cheat, to negotiate, to confess, because they believed no one was watching. They always forget something. Security systems don't blink. I arrived early and took the corner table with my back against the wall, full view of the entrance. My hands wrapped around a glass of orange juice, but I didn't drink. My stomach wasn't just unsettled from pregnancy, it was unsettled from the truth. Because now I knew the full shape of Donovan's plan. He poisoned the food. He expected me to eat it. When I didn't, fate saved me by sacrificing someone else. And what chilled me most wasn't that he tried to hurt me, it was that he tried to do it cleanly, like erasing a stain. Naomi had done her work fast. Call logs, footage, shell company paper trails. Marcus, Donovan's assistant cousin, had met a woman in sunglasses and exchanged a package wrapped in newspaper. That woman was Celeste Harper, a pharmacist, and, according to Naomi, Donovan's old college flame. The just one mistake type of woman men pretended didn't matter, until she became the only supplier who could hand them a restricted drug without raising alarms. I watched the entrance, pulse steady, mind sharp. In this meeting, I wasn't coming as a wife. I was coming as an investigator. Right on time, Celeste entered. Her presence turned heads, not because she was the most beautiful woman in the room, but because she carried herself like she owned every space she stepped into. Wine-colored silk dress, designer bag, sunglasses that covered half her face, a smile that said, "I know something you don't." She scanned the cafe, spotted me, and approached with slow confidence, like she expected me to be shaking, begging, crying. She sat without asking. Then she slid her sunglasses down and looked me directly at. "Well," she purred, "I didn't expect the perfect wife to invite me out for coffee. What is it, Amara? Need advice on how to keep a man?" She smiled like she'd already won. My face stayed calm. That annoyed her. She leaned in, voice sweet but sharp. "I'm surprised you're still standing after everything. Some women collapse when they realize their husbands don't love them." I waited a beat, just long enough to make her feel like her words mattered. Then I spoke softly. "I didn't call you here to fight over Donovan," I said. "A man like him isn't something I compete for. I called you here to save you." She laughed, too loud, too careless. "Save me?" she repeated. "From what? I have a career, I have money, I have freedom. Worry about yourself." I didn't argue. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't show emotion. I simply pulled out my phone, unlocked it, and slid it across the table. On the screen was the security image Naomi had obtained. Celeste meeting Marcus, handing him a package wrapped in newspaper, both glancing around like criminals. Her laughter died instantly. Celeste stared at the phone as if it had turned into a weapon. Her fingers, perfectly manicured, trembled when she picked it up. The color drained from her face so fast it was almost violent. "Where?" she whispered, then swallowed. Where did you get this? I kept my voice even. Cameras, I said. The same thing that's going to destroy you if you keep pretending you're untouchable. Her eyes snapped up, defensive panic rising. You can't prove what was in that package. I could have given him anything. I tilted my head slightly. You're right, I said. By itself, a photo doesn't prove the contents, but the police don't need to guess when there are call logs, timelines, and pharmacy tracking. Misoprostol isn't candy. It leaves trails. The name hit her like a punch. Her lips parted. She tried to recover with arrogance, but it sounded weak now. You're bluffing. I leaned forward just a little. Celeste, I said quietly, you're a pharmacist. You know exactly what happens when law enforcement starts tracing restricted medication. They'll check sourcing, batch numbers, distribution records, and once they find the origin, they'll ask one question. I paused. Why would a pharmacist give an abortion-inducing drug to a CEO's assistant in a parking lot exchange? She stared at me, breathing shallow. I didn't stop. Donovan is already trying to blame someone else. First, he blamed me. Then he tried to blame Lila. He even ordered Marcus to deliver fake receipts to me so I'd plant them as evidence. Her eyes widened further. He did what? I nodded once. He's desperate, and desperate men don't protect partners. They sacrifice them. Celeste's chin quivered. For the first time, she looked less like a glamorous woman and more like a person standing at the edge of a cliff. I didn't poison anyone, I swear. Donovan told me. He told me you were pregnant by another man. He said he wanted to end it quietly so he could divorce you without losing everything. The words made my stomach clench. Quietly. My child reduced to a problem to remove. I kept my face controlled, but my voice sharpened. And when the police knock on your door, Celeste, what do you think Donovan will say? She swallowed hard. I answered for her. He'll say you acted alone. He'll say you're unstable. He'll say you were jealous and wanted to hurt me. He'll paint you as the mastermind, because that's what men like Donovan do. Celeste's chin quivered. No, he wouldn't. I watched her carefully and chose my final strike. He already threatened you, I said. After Lila collapsed, he told you to stay quiet and blame her. You think that's love? That's not love. That's a man preparing to bury you. Her shoulders collapsed inwards like something broke inside her. And then the confident Celeste, who walked in like a queen, began to shake. I don't want to go to prison. I just wanted money, and I still loved him. I didn't mock her. I didn't comfort her either. I gave her the only truth that mattered. Then you have one way out, I said. Give me everything. Messages, calls, proof he ordered it. You cooperate and you become a witness, not a co-defendant. She hesitated, looking around as if the cafe itself might judge her. Then she opened her designer bag with shaking hands and pulled out a small silver flash drive. This is everything, she whispered, sliding it towards me as if it were burning her skin. Recordings, screenshots, payment confirmations, his promises, his threats. I picked it up slowly, feeling the weight of it in my palm. A piece of metal, but inside it, Donovan's downfall. You made the right choice, I said. Don't call him, don't warn him. Wait until you're contacted. Her voice cracked again. Will I lose my license? I looked at her for a long moment. Some consequences are unavoidable, but prison doesn't have to be one of them. I stood, walked out, and didn't look back. Because the moment I held that flash drive, I knew the storm was no longer coming. It had already started. The flash drive felt heavier than it should have. Not because of its size, but because of what it carried. Truth compressed into cold metal, waiting to detonate. I didn't go home. I didn't go back to the office either. There were too many eyes there, too many whispers, too many ways for information to leak. Instead, I drove across town to a small private office owned by an old friend from law school. The building was unremarkable, almost invisible among closed shops and dim streetlights. Inside, though, it was soundproof, secure, and most importantly, safe. The moment I locked the door behind me, my legs felt weak. I sat at the desk, placed the flash drive in front of me, and stared at it for a long time. My reflection in the dark computer screen looked unfamiliar, eyes sharper, face thinner, fear and resolve braided together. I took a slow breath and plugged it in. Folders appeared instantly, neatly labeled: dates, times, audio files, screenshots. Celeste had prepared for betrayal long before she admitted it. I clicked on the most recent audio recording. For half a second, there was static. Then, Donovan's voice filled the room. Not the voice he used with shareholders, not the voice he used with me. This one was colder. "Find something strong," he said calmly. "Preferably colorless, odorless. I want it mixed into food." My chest tightened. Celeste's voice followed, hesitant. "That's dangerous. What if—" Donovan cut her off. "I want it to look like a spontaneous miscarriage," he said. "Clean, no complications. That pregnancy is an obstacle." Obstacle. My vision blurred as tears slid silently down my cheeks. This wasn't suspicion anymore. This wasn't inference. This was my husband speaking clearly, deliberately, planning the death of our child like he was canceling a business contract. I pressed my palm against my mouth to keep from sobbing and listened to the next recording. It was from after Leela collapsed. Donovan's voice was sharper now, panicked, vicious. "Shut up and listen to me," he snapped. "Blame her. Say she bought the drug herself. If you even think about mentioning my name, I'll make sure you regret it." Threats, blackmail, no remorse. I copied every file. One copy went onto a secure drive from my lawyer. Another went into encrypted cloud storage. The original flash drive went into my purse, zipped deep inside. When I finally shut the laptop, the room felt eerily quiet, like the air itself was holding its breath. My hand drifted to my stomach. "I'm sorry," I whispered to the life growing inside me. "I chose the wrong man, but I promise you, I won't choose wrong again." The next morning, the office felt like a pressure cooker. Employees spoke in hushed tones. Conversations stopped when I walked by. Fear spread faster than facts ever could, and rumors multiplied in the absence of truth. I went straight to my office and closed the door. Naomi was already there, laptop open, eyes sharp. "He's unraveling," she said without preamble. "Marcus is trying to access the accounting system." My pulse spiked. To do what? To erase transfers, shell companies, payments to Celeste, everything. I exhaled slowly. "Can he?" Naomi smiled grimly. "No, we locked him out last night. Every failed attempt is being logged and backed up." Right on cue, my computer chimed softly. Naomi turned the screen toward me. Security footage from a hidden camera under Donovan's desk. Marcus was pacing, hair disheveled, shirt damp with sweat. He slammed his fists on the desk and pulled out his phone. I slipped on my headphones. The call connected. "Donovan, I can't delete anything. Someone locked me out. If the police audit the books, we're finished." Donovan's voice roared through the speakers. "Useless. I told you to clean it properly. Now, listen to me. Shift the blame. Make it look like Leela was depressed. Say she tried to kill herself." Marcus hesitated. "She just lost her baby. That's cruel." Donovan laughed. A cold, hollow sound. "Cruelty or prison? Choose." The call ended. I took off my headphones slowly, nausea rolling through me, not from pregnancy, but from disgust. Even now, cornered, exposed, Donovan was still trying to crush someone weaker to save himself. Before I could speak, my phone rang. A message from Naomi's private driver. Leela's mother has arrived at the bus station. Mrs. Bell. She'd come from a small rural town the moment she heard her daughter had been hospitalized. I closed my eyes briefly. This was about to get uglier. By lunchtime, the lobby was packed. Employees, visitors, delivery staff. That's when the doors burst open. Mrs. Bell stormed in. She was small, thin, dressed in worn clothes and old sneakers, but the rage in her eyes made the entire room freeze. Her voice, cracked with pain, echoed off the marble walls. "Where is that man?" she screamed. "Where is Donovan?" Security tried to stop her, but she shook them off like they were nothing. People began filming. Donovan had no choice but to come down. When he stepped out of the private elevator, his face tightened, but he forced a smile. "Ma'am, let's talk somewhere private," he said quietly. Mrs. Bell pointed at him, finger trembling. "You ruined my daughter's life," she shouted. "You used her, killed her baby, and now you say she tried to kill herself?" Donovan glanced around, jaw tight. He signaled Marcus. Marcus rushed forward and shoved a thick envelope into Mrs. Bell's hands. "Take this," he whispered, "for expenses. Take her home. Don't make this harder." She opened the envelope. Cash. Thousands of dollars. The lobby went silent. Mrs. Bell looked at the money, then at Donovan. Then she threw it in his face. Bills fluttered through the air like dead leaves. "I'm poor, but I'm not selling my daughter's blood." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Phones lifted higher. Donovan stood frozen, humiliation burning across his face. That was the moment I knew he'd lost. Not because of police, not because of evidence, but because he tried to buy silence from a mother who had nothing left to lose. That night, I finally went home. The house felt cold, hollow. Donovan sat in the living room with a glass of whiskey, staring at nothing. He looked up when I entered. "You enjoyed that today," he said bitterly. I didn't answer. He walked into the kitchen and returned with a glass of warm milk. "Drink," he said softly. "It'll help you relax." My blood ran cold. I took the glass, met his eyes, then walked to a potted plant in the corner. Slowly, deliberately, I poured the milk into the soil. "I'm not accusing you," I said calmly. "I just don't trust anything you give me anymore." His face drained of color. For the first time, he knew, I knew, and dawn was coming. The morning felt different. Not quiet, heavy, like the air itself knew something irreversible was about to happen. I dressed carefully, not in morning black, not in power red, but in calm gray. I wanted no drama attached to my appearance. Today wasn't about emotion, it was about truth. As I fastened my earrings, I caught my reflection in the mirror. Steady eyes, controlled breath, a woman who had already survived the worst. This wasn't just a shareholders' meeting, it was an execution. When I arrived at the company, silence followed me through the lobby. Employees avoided my gaze. Some looked guilty, others looked relieved. Everyone knew something was coming, even if they didn't know what. The boardroom doors were already open. Shareholders sat around the long, polished table, men and women in tailored suits, murmuring over tablets and documents. At the head of the table sat Donovan, my husband, the CEO. His gray suit hung a little too loose on his frame. Dark circles bruised his eyes. He tapped a pen rhythmically against the table, the same nervous habit he had when deals went bad. When he saw me, his gaze sharpened. Not fear, calculation. He still thought he could control this. The meeting began with routine formalities, quarterly numbers, project projections. Then Donovan nodded toward Marcus, who stood up with a tablet and shaking hands. "The next agenda item," Marcus began, "is approval of the Green Crest Eco Resort Initiative." I almost smiled. The Shell Project, the one Donovan planned to use to siphon off company funds before everything collapsed. Marcus presented slides, polished graphics, exaggerated profits, vague expenses. I watched the shareholders' faces tighten as numbers stopped making sense. When Marcus finished, Donovan stood up. "This project represents the future," he said smoothly. "I urge the board to approve it." He raised his hand to vote. That was my cue. I stood slowly. The scrape of my chair against the floor sliced through the room like a blade. Every head turned. "Before we vote," I said calmly, "I believe we should discuss the legal and moral capacity of the person proposing this project." Donovan slammed his hand on the table. "Amara, this is not the place for personal grievances." I met his eyes without flinching. "An affair is personal. Using company funds to maintain a mistress through shell companies is not. Attempted murder is not. Poisoning food with an abortion-inducing drug is definitely not." The room erupted. Gasps, murmurs, chairs shifting. Donovan's face drained of color. "Enough!" he shouted. "This is slander." I nodded once toward Naomi. She dimmed the lights. The projector flickered on. The first slide appeared. Bank transfers. Red circles highlighted payments from company accounts to D&M Consulting Group, Marcus's shell company. From there, arrows led to luxury apartment rent, private clinic payments, and untraceable cash withdrawals. A shareholder leaned forward. "What is this?" "Embezzlement," I replied, "disguised as representation expenses." I clicked again. Messages between Donovan and Marcus appeared. Screenshots, time-stamped, authenticated. "Handle it. Get rid of the paper trail. Don't let this touch me." Whispers grew louder. Donovan lunged forward. "These are fabricated." I clicked again. The room fell silent. Audio filled the speakers. Donovan's voice, cold, unmistakable. "I want it to look like a spontaneous miscarriage. Clean. That pregnancy is an obstacle." A woman at the table covered her mouth. Another whispered, "Oh my God!" Donovan snapped. He rushed toward the projector, grabbing for cables, screaming, "Turn it off! It's fake! She manipulated my voice!" Security stepped in immediately. 2 guards Naomi had arranged in advance. They restrained him as he struggled, red-faced, veins bulging in his neck. I approached him slowly. "You cooked the food because you wanted full control. You didn't expect nausea to save my life." His eyes burned with hatred. I turned back to the board. "I have already submitted copies of this evidence to law enforcement. I formally motion for the immediate removal of Donovan as CEO." For a moment, no one spoke. Then one shareholder stood up. "I second the motion." Another followed. Then another. The vote was swift, unanimous. Donovan slid down against the wall as if his legs could no longer support him. Defeated. The doors burst open. 2 police officers entered, followed by my lawyer and Celeste. She wore no makeup, no confidence, just fear and resignation. "Donovan Jenkins, you are under arrest for attempted murder, financial fraud, and conspiracy." Handcuffs clicked shut around his wrists. The sound echoed. Marcus collapsed into a chair, sobbing. "It was him," Marcus cried. "He forced me. I'll tell you everything." Donovan stared at Marcus in disbelief. "Traitor," he hissed. They led Donovan past me. He stopped. "Since when were you planning this? Why are you being so cruel?" I leaned close enough for only him to hear. "Since the moment you tried to kill our child," said softly. "Compared to that, prison is mercy." He was dragged away. The doors closed. The silence that followed felt clean, like the air after a storm. That afternoon, I sat alone in my office, hands resting on my stomach. "It's over," I whispered. But deep down, I knew this wasn't the end. It was just the beginning of justice. I didn't go to the police station with any sense of victory. If anything, I felt hollow. Justice doesn't always feel like triumph. Sometimes it feels like standing in the ruins of something you once believed in, realizing there's nothing left to mourn. The interrogation room was cold and gray, stripped of personality. A single table, 2 chairs, a one-way mirror that reflected my face faintly when the light shifted. I stood behind that glass, arms crossed, my lawyer beside me, watching as they brought Donovan in. He looked smaller. Not physically, he was still tall, still broad-shouldered, but something inside him had collapsed. His suit was wrinkled, his tie gone, his hair unkempt. The man who once commanded boardrooms now looked like someone who had lost the script to his own life. They sat him down. A recorder clicked on. "State your name," the detective said. "Donovan Jenkins," he replied hoarsely. The detective slid a folder across the table, thick, heavy. "You're aware you're being charged with attempted murder, conspiracy, and financial fraud." Donovan let out a bitter laugh. "You're making this bigger than it is." Behind the glass, my stomach clenched. The detective leaned back. "Then help us understand it. Why was misoprostol found fully dissolved in food you prepared?" Donovan rubbed his face, dragging his hands down like he was wiping away sweat that wouldn't disappear. "I didn't mean for anyone to die," he said quietly. "It was supposed to be simple." Simple. I closed my eyes briefly. "Simple how?" the detective pressed. Donovan hesitated, then shrugged as if the truth was too heavy to keep carrying. "My wife was pregnant. That child would have ruined everything." The words echoed in my head louder than the recording equipment. "Ruined everything." "Explain," the detective said. Donovan leaned forward, elbows on the table, voice steadying as if he were explaining a business decision. "We had a prenup. If she had a child, the asset split would be unfavorable. The company would have been at risk. Investors get nervous when leadership gets distracted." I felt my nails dig into my palms. A baby, reduced to a line item. "So you decided to end the pregnancy," the detective said flatly. "Yes," Donovan replied, quietly. "No drama, no mess. A miscarriage happens all the time." Behind the glass, my lawyer inhaled sharply. The detective's jaw tightened. "And the secretary?" Donovan's eyes flickered. "That was an accident. I didn't know Leela was pregnant. She told me she was on birth control. If I'd known, I would have handled it earlier." Handled it. The room felt like it was tilting. "You would have forced her to abort?" the detective asked. Donovan didn't answer. Silence was answer enough. The detective slid another document across the table. "This report confirms paternity. The fetus Leela lost was biologically yours, 99.99% certainty." Donovan's face went completely blank. "A boy," the detective added. "It was a boy." Something inside Donovan broke. He grabbed the paper, staring at it as if the words might rearrange themselves. "A boy," he whispered. "It was a boy." Then his shoulders shook. He pressed his forehead against the table and let out a sound that wasn't a cry, but wasn't laughter either. It was the sound of a man realizing the one thing he valued had been destroyed by his own hand. Behind the glass, I felt nothing. No satisfaction, no pity, only relief that my child would never call this man father. The detective waited for Donovan to calm before continuing. "You threatened Celeste Harper after the poisoning. You instructed your assistant to falsify evidence and blame the victim." Donovan lifted his head slowly. "I was protecting myself. Everyone does that. By sacrificing others. That's how the world works." The detective clicked off the recorder and stood. "We're done here." They led Donovan away. I turned from the glass before he could look back. A week later, Leela was discharged from the hospital. Physically alive, emotionally destroyed. Doctors confirmed what she already knew. Her uterus had suffered irreversible damage. She would never carry a child again. Mrs. Bell took her back to a cramped rental on the outskirts of the city. When I visited, the place smelled of mold and sadness. Leela sat in a corner, hair tangled, eyes empty. Mrs. Bell tried to refuse the envelope I left on the table. "It's not charity," I told her gently. "It's her last paycheck and help for medicine." Mrs. Bell cried. Leela never looked at me. Before I left, I spoke once, only once. Never build your future on someone else's pain. The cost is always higher than you think. The trial moved fast. Evidence was overwhelming. Confessions were recorded. Witnesses cooperated. I didn't attend the sentencing. I watched it on the news from home, one hand resting on my belly. Donovan was sentenced to 12 years in prison. No appeals, no delays. When the judge's gavel fell, something inside me finally unclenched. 6 months later, during a stormy night, I went into labor. The hospital hallway smelled the same as before, disinfectant and fear, but this time the outcome was different. After hours of pain, a cry filled the room. "It's a girl," the nurse smiled. "She's healthy." They placed her on my chest. I named her Hope, because that's what she was. 2 years later, the company flourished under honest leadership. Scandals faded, numbers recovered. Hope ran through my office one afternoon, laughing, alive. My phone buzzed. A message from a kind, steady business partner. "Do you and Hope want to visit the countryside this weekend?" I smiled. Happiness wasn't a destination. It was choosing to live after surviving the storm. The divorce papers sat on my desk for 3 days before I touched them. Not because I hesitated, but because I wanted to be absolutely certain that when I finally walked into that prison, I would feel nothing. No anger, no grief, no nostalgia. Only clarity. My lawyer insisted I didn't have to go. "He'll sign anyway," she said. "The evidence is overwhelming. He has no leverage." But I knew something she didn't. Men like Donovan don't crumble quietly. They cling to the illusion that someone, especially the woman they betrayed, will save them. I needed to look him in the eyes and end that illusion. The prison was exactly how I imagined it. Gray, heavy, stripped of identity. Every step echoed. Every door closed with finality. When they led me into the visitation room, a thick glass wall separated 2 chairs and a phone. I sat down calmly. A moment later, Donovan was escorted in. I barely recognized him. His hair was shaved, his face hollow, his suit replaced by an oversized prison uniform that hung off his shoulders like a punishment of its own. The arrogance that once filled every room he entered was gone. But when he saw me, hope flickered. He rushed to the glass and grabbed the phone with shaking hands. "Amara," he said quickly, "you came. I knew you would." I didn't pick up the phone right away. I watched him, watched how desperation had replaced confidence, how fear had hollowed out his eyes. Finally, I lifted the receiver. "This isn't a visit," I said evenly. "It's a formality." His face tightened. "Don't say that," he pleaded. "I made a mistake, a terrible mistake, but people change. Think about our 3 years together. Think about our child." The audacity almost made me laugh. "You mean the child you tried to kill?" I asked calmly. He flinched like I'd struck him. "I didn't want to kill anyone," he said quickly. "I just wanted to protect what I built. I didn't think—" "That's the problem. You thought only about yourself." I slid the divorce papers and a pen through the slot beneath the glass. "Sign." He stared at the documents as if they were a death sentence. "If I sign, I lose everything." I leaned closer to the glass. "No," I corrected. "You already lost everything. This just makes it official." Tears filled his eyes. "I'll start over," he begged. "When I get out, I'll be different. Our child deserves a father." My voice hardened, not with anger, but truth. "My child deserves safety, and you are not safe." He gripped the phone tighter. "You're being cruel," he said hoarsely. I met his gaze steadily. "Cruel is poisoning your wife. Cruel is planning a miscarriage like it's a business deal. Cruel is sacrificing anyone who gets in your way." Silence stretched between us. Finally, he lowered his head. You were supposed to be on my side, he murmured. I shook my head slowly. I was, I said, until you made yourself my enemy. He picked up the pen. His signature came out shaky, uneven, nothing like the confident strokes he used to sign million-dollar contracts. When he slid the papers back, something inside him collapsed completely. I stood. Rehabilitate yourself, if not for me, then for the world you'll eventually return to. As I turned to leave, he pressed his palm against the glass. Amara, he whispered, do you hate me? I paused, but didn't turn back. Hate requires attachment. I feel nothing. The door closed behind me with a dull, final sound. And just like that, the past was sealed. Life didn't magically become easy after that. Healing isn't cinematic. It's quiet, messy, slow. There were court filings, asset divisions, public statements. I handled them all with precision. The prenup held. Donovan's mother tried to interfere, accusing me of betrayal, of greed, of destroying her son. I didn't argue. I sent her the audio files. She never contacted me again. 2 months later, I received a message from my lawyer. The appeal was denied. Sentence upheld. I closed my eyes and exhaled. That chapter was finished. Hope turned 1 shortly after. She took her first steps in my living room, wobbling toward me with a laugh that felt like sunlight. Watching her, I realized something important. Survival isn't the opposite of suffering. It's what suffering teaches you to protect. The company stabilized under transparent leadership. Employees who once whispered now spoke freely. Investors returned. Trust rebuilt itself, slowly, brick by brick. One afternoon, while Hope napped on my chest, my phone buzzed. A message from Kendrick, the business partner who had stood quietly beside me during the worst days. There's a nature reserve outside the city. Would you and Hope like to get away this weekend? I smiled. Not because I was ready for romance, but because I was ready for peace. That night, I stood by the window, city lights stretching endlessly below. I placed one hand over my heart and another over Hope's sleeping form. Your life will never be built on fear, I whispered. Outside, the sky was clear. No storm, no warning, just open space. And for the first time in a long time, I felt free. The divorce papers sat on my desk for 3 days before I touched them. Not because I hesitated, but because I wanted to be absolutely certain that when I finally walked into that prison, I would feel nothing. No anger, no grief, no nostalgia. Only clarity. My lawyer insisted I didn't have to go. He'll sign anyway, she said. The evidence is overwhelming. He has no leverage. But I knew something she didn't. Men like Donovan don't crumble quietly. They cling to the illusion that someone, especially the woman they betrayed, will save them. I needed to look him in the eyes and end that illusion. The prison was exactly how I imagined it. Gray, heavy, stripped of identity. Every step echoed. Every door closed with finality. When they led me into the visitation room, a thick glass wall separated 2 chairs and a phone. I sat down calmly. A moment later, Donovan was escorted in. I barely recognized him. His hair was shaved, his face hollow, his suit replaced by an oversized prison uniform that hung off his shoulders like a punishment of its own. The arrogance that once filled every room he entered was gone. But when he saw me, hope flickered. He rushed to the glass and grabbed the phone with shaking hands. "Amara," he said quickly, "you came. I knew you would." I didn't pick up the phone right away. I watched him, watched how desperation had replaced confidence, how fear had hollowed out his eyes. Finally, I lifted the receiver. "This isn't a visit," I said evenly. "It's a formality." His face tightened. "Don't say that," he pleaded. "I made a mistake, a terrible mistake, but people change. Think about our 3 years together. Think about our child. The audacity almost made me laugh. You mean the child you tried to kill? I asked calmly. He flinched like I'd struck him. I didn't want to kill anyone, he said quickly. I just wanted to protect what I built. I didn't think. That's the problem. You thought only about yourself. I slid the divorce papers and a pen through the slot beneath the glass. Sign. He stared at the documents as if they were a death sentence. If I sign, I lose everything. I leaned closer to the glass. No, I corrected. You already lost everything. This just makes it official. Tears filled his eyes. I'll start over, he begged. When I get out, I'll be different. Our child deserves a father. My voice hardened, not with anger, but truth. My child deserves safety, and you are not safe. He gripped the phone tighter. You're being cruel, he said hoarsely. I met his gaze steadily. Cruel is poisoning your wife. Cruel is planning a miscarriage like it's a business deal. Cruel is sacrificing anyone who gets in your way. Silence stretched between us. Finally, he lowered his head. You were supposed to be on my side, he murmured. I shook my head slowly. I was, I said, until you made yourself my enemy. He picked up the pen. His signature came out shaky, uneven, nothing like the confident strokes he used to sign million-dollar contracts. When he slid the papers back, something inside him collapsed completely. I stood. Rehabilitate yourself, if not for me, then for the world you'll eventually return to. As I turned to leave, he pressed his palm against the glass. Amara, he whispered, do you hate me? I paused, but didn't turn back. Hate requires attachment. I feel nothing. The door closed behind me with a dull, final sound. And just like that, the past was sealed. Life didn't magically become easy after that. Healing isn't cinematic. It's quiet, messy, slow. There were court filings, asset divisions, public statements. I handled them all with precision. The prenup held. Donovan's mother tried to interfere, accusing me of betrayal, of greed, of destroying her son. I didn't argue. I sent her the audio files. She never contacted me again. 2 months later, I received a message from my lawyer. The appeal was denied. Sentence upheld. I closed my eyes and exhaled. That chapter was finished. Hope turned 1 shortly after. She took her first steps in my living room, wobbling toward me with a laugh that felt like sunlight. Watching her, I realized something important. Survival isn't the opposite of suffering. It's what suffering teaches you to protect. The company stabilized under transparent leadership. Employees who once whispered now spoke freely. Investors returned. Trust rebuilt itself, slowly, brick by brick. One afternoon, while Hope napped on my chest, my phone buzzed. A message from Kendrick, the business partner who had stood quietly beside me during the worst days. There's a nature reserve outside the city. Would you and Hope like to get away this weekend? I smiled. Not because I was ready for romance, but because I was ready for peace. That night, I stood by the window, city lights stretching endlessly below. I placed one hand over my heart and another over Hope's sleeping form. Your life will never be built on fear, I whispered. Outside, the sky was clear. No storm, no warning, just open space. And for the first time in a long time, I felt free. Freedom doesn't arrive with fireworks. It comes quietly on an ordinary morning when you wake up and realize your chest doesn't feel tight anymore. That was how it happened for me. The trial had ended months ago. The headlines had faded. Donovan's name no longer trended on business news channels, replaced by the next scandal, the next fallen executive. Society has a short memory, but consequences don't forget. I was standing in my kitchen one morning watching sunlight spill across the floor while Hope played with wooden blocks at my feet. She laughed when one tower collapsed, clapping like failure was a game instead of a tragedy. That laugh did something to me. It reminded me how close I came to never hearing it. I bent down, lifted her into my arms, and held her longer than necessary. She smelled like milk and soap and safety, and in that moment, I understood something I hadn't before. Surviving isn't the victory. Choosing how to live afterward is. The company didn't recover overnight. Trust never does. But step by step, we rebuilt it, not with flashy promises, but with transparency. I fired anyone even remotely tied to Donovan's shadow network. I opened the books to independent auditors. I faced investors directly, answered questions without dodging, and admitted where we had failed. Some walked away, others stayed. And slowly, the numbers stabilized. One afternoon, as I reviewed her quarterly reports, Naomi stood in my doorway with a faint smile. "Stock's up again," she said, and for the first time, no one's whispering. I nodded. "Good," I replied. "That's how it should be." Naomi hesitated. "Can I say something personal?" I looked up. "Of course." "You didn't just save the company," she said softly. "You saved a lot of people who were scared but didn't know how to speak." Her words stayed with me long after she left. Power doesn't always look like dominance. Sometimes it looks like standing firm when silence would be easier. I heard news of Leela through mutual contacts. She and Mrs. Bell returned to their small town. Leela didn't come back to the city. She didn't try to rebuild her old life. Instead, she disappeared into anonymity, working part-time, attending therapy, relearning how to live in a body that had betrayed her and been betrayed. I never reached out again, not out of cruelty, but because some chapters must close completely to heal. Celeste sent me one message months later, a long apology filled with regret and explanations. I didn't reply. Her pharmacist license was revoked. Her career ended quietly, without spectacle. That was the price of choosing convenience over conscience. And Donovan? Donovan aged rapidly behind bars. I saw one photo of him in a news article, shrunken, hollow-eyed, stripped of the charisma that once defined him. 12 years is a long time when your only audience is regret. He wrote me once, a handwritten letter. I never opened it. Some voices don't deserve space in your future. Hope grew fast, too fast. One moment she was learning to walk, the next she was running through the garden behind our house, chasing butterflies and asking questions about everything she saw. Why is the sky so big? Why do people cry? Why do flowers die? Each question reminded me how fragile life is and how precious. One evening, as I tucked her into bed, she asked something that stopped me cold. "Mammy, do I have a daddy?" Children always ask the hardest questions with the softest voices. I sat beside her and brushed her hair gently. "I had a father," I said carefully, "but he wasn't able to be the kind of person who keeps others safe." She thought for a moment. "Is that why it's just us?" "Yes," I answered, "and that's okay." She smiled sleepily. "I like just us." I kissed her forehead and turned off the light, tears burning behind my eyes, not from sadness, but from gratitude. 2 years after everything ended, I took Hope out of the city for the first time. We drove toward the countryside, where the air smelled cleaner and the horizon stretched without interruption. Kendrick met us there, not as a savior, not as a rescuer, but as a kind presence who respected silence and didn't push. We walked through tall grass, Hope holding both our hands, laughing when the wind tangled her hair. For the first time since the storm, I didn't feel guarded. I felt present. That night, after Hope fell asleep, Kendrick and I sat on the porch listening to crickets. "You don't have to be strong all the time. You know that, right?" I smiled. "I know," I replied. "But now, strength feels lighter." Years later, people would still ask me how I survived, how I didn't break, how I found the courage to expose a powerful man and rebuild from ashes. I always gave them the same answer. I didn't survive because I was fearless. I survived because I chose truth over comfort every single time. The world likes to romanticize resilience, but resilience is ugly before it's beautiful. It's shaking hands, sleepless nights, choosing to speak when silence feels safer. And sometimes, it's nausea that saves your life. One afternoon, as Hope colored beside my desk, she looked up and asked, "Mammy, are we happy?" I didn't answer immediately. Happiness isn't loud. It doesn't announce itself. It just exists when you're no longer running from fear. "Yes," I said finally, "we are." She smiled and went back to coloring. Outside the window, the sky was clear. No storms, no warnings, just light. And that's how my story ends. Not with revenge, not with hatred, but with something far more powerful: peace. If this story made you feel anger, pain, or relief, you're not alone. Comment below and tell me, what would you have done in my place? Do you think the husband got what he deserved, or was justice still too soft? Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications, because the next story might hit even closer to home. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you in the next life story.